This is a story about Abraham and Sarah. They're important to the Bible because they are the beginning of a new nation that God had planned. And the reason for that new nation, it points, just like everything else in the Old Testament, it points to something very important in the future. And the story has to be told from the very beginning. Now, Abraham and Sarah are 10 generations away from the flood. The stair steps, like I talked about the generations before, the parents had children and it's like stair steps. Well, there's 10 stair steps from the man Shem, who was Noah's son, and he was in the flood in the ark with Noah, and he 10 stair steps away from Abraham and Sarah. Now, Abraham and Sarah's father's name was Terah. Now, the thing about Terah was he had two families. His first family had a son named Abram. And 10 years later, I think it's just pretty close to 10 years later, he had another family with another mother, and their child's name was Sarah. So Abram, and her name was Sarai, excuse me. So Abram and Sarai were half brothers and sisters. They had the same father, but two different mothers. And they had different names to start with. God would change their names later on to Abraham and Sarah, but they started out as Abram and Sarai. Now, as Abram grew, he pleased God with his good character. And God had a plan, and he would use Abram in this plan if he obeyed. Well, when Abram found out that he pleased God, he wanted to obey. He wanted to follow God every step of the way. But he also had a choice. He didn't have to follow God, but he wanted to follow God. So the very first thing that God told Abram to do was to pack up all of his stuff, all of his animals, and to leave his hometown, and to leave most of his friends and most of his relatives, and go to a new land that God would show him that was far away. Now, that was a hard decision to make for some people, but for Abram, I think he made it pretty fast. If God told him, and also God made him a promise. He said, if you do this, I will make of you a great nation, of your family. Your family will become a great nation. Well, Abram and Sarai had no children yet. So that promise was something that they would really be happy about. God promised them a family, and that's something they wanted more than anything. Well, when God makes a promise, he keeps his promise. He always keeps his promises. But the promise had something that Abraham had to do first. He had to move to this new land called Canaan. It was far away. It was a very long trip and a lot of work. But they were ready to go, ready to get ready. They started packing up, and they packed up plenty of stuff to have. Everybody had a tent, and they had food, and they had animals. They were also going to take Terah with them. he was a very old man and he needed care. So we're supposed to take care of our parents. So they took Terah with them. They also took a nephew named Lot, and he will be in one of our stories later. But just to know that he went with them, and they took all the animals, lots of animals. And they had people that worked for them and took care of the animals and helped them. I imagine some of them were workers and some of them were friends. Anyway, it was like a whole big tribe of people on this long journey. And they packed up their stuff and they had animals to carry things. And they were going to live in tents. Have you ever lived in a tent? I think I did when I was a kid. We went camping and it was kind of fun for a little while. But after a long while, it might not be quite as much fun. But they were very good at living in a tent. So the troop of people were all ready, and the God of heaven was there to guide them on their way to the land called Canaan. And they first came to a land called Haran, and it's on the map. And they had to stop and rest there for a while because Terah, the old man, was not well. And there he had to rest, and then his age got to him, and he died. And they took care of Terah till he died. They were good children. And he had lived a very long life, and people lived longer then, but that was slowly beginning to change to people didn't live quite as long as Terah did. I think he was 200 years old when he died. And when he died, the Bible says that Abram was 75 years old. And we kind of think that it was 10 years between Abram and Sarah, and she would be 65. So that was when they left Haran. And then they started on their way again, and we'll get that story later.